I want to take us right now to Hawaii. And that is because there has been a victory that has come out of Hawaii. You may remember this. We did some blogs on it. We've been talking about it. It's been, it was not a super long, drawn-out case. Sometimes these take months. Sometimes they take years. But sometimes you actually have a school board who has some sense, a Department of Education that has some sense out of Hawaii. This is what happened. I'll give you sort of the brief breakdown, and then we're going to bring in one of our attorneys, Nathan, who worked on this case. But essentially, a teacher was talking to her students. This was shortly after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and they started talking about political assassinations and the discussions about that at hand. And it came up, and people were going back and forth about it. And she started talking about, hey, what are some other political assassinations, things that have happened like this that you think of that people were shot or murdered for their for their political views or for their speech. And someone brought up an Abraham Lincoln, someone brought up John F. Kennedy, and then someone brought up the attempted assassination of President Trump. And when I say someone, I mean a child, a student. A student then responded with something to the effect of, yeah, but that wouldn't have been a bad thing. And all this teacher did was correct that and say, you know what? That is not how we do things here. That is not a nice thing to say, essentially. We don't do that in America. And that was enough for some other parents to get very upset, Will.
That's right. And we have now Nathan Molker, who is one of our attorneys out of D.C., joining us because, Nathan, this teacher was brought into a large meeting with the entire social studies department and then also had a separate meeting where they were reprimanded. There was a memo placed in their file, their official record about this, and they were told that they would be disciplined and students would be disciplined if controversial speech were not suppressed within the classroom. The ACLJ went right to action. We wrote a very strong letter to the Department of Education of Hawaii and tell our audience, one, what we argued, why we knew that this was wrong, and what that response we got back from the Department of Education was.
Sure. So Logan mentioned how quickly this one moved, and that was definitely the case here. Our letter was only sent October 16th, and we just got this response from the Hawaii Department of Education. And so what we unpacked in this letter here is that this teacher was really left in a difficult and an impossible position. She's a history teacher, and she's being told not to teach anything that might be controversial. And of course, as a history teacher, everything might be controversial to somebody. And all she was trying to do was just acknowledge the simple fact that Charlie Kirk was murdered and to use that, as any teacher should, as an opportunity to teach her students. So because of that, because of simply trying to teach her students about the Constitution, ironically enough, she was reprimanded. And of course, they tried to dance around it. Oh, we're not calling this a reprimand. We're calling it a statement of understanding. We're calling it this. We're calling it that. But when she pressed them and said, okay, what is this document and why is it going into my personnel file? They explained, well, it's in case we need to discipline you later. And so what is so exciting with this response we received from the Hawaii Department of Education late last night is, as the first part of their response, they rescinded that document. They rescinded that summary of conference. And so therefore, that action has been taken out of her personnel file. And this whole situation where she was blamed just for teaching the Constitution to her students has been corrected, and she has had that right restored, really, by this acknowledgement from the Hawaii Department of Education. It really represents a major victory for her rights to speak.
And what I love about this, Nathan, also is that in this letter that we received from the Hawaii Department of Education, which we took it all the way to the top, and is that not only did they take those actions saying it's removed from the employee's file and giving us the assurance no adverse action has been taken or would have been taken, so future looking against our client, but they also admit and show within their own Board of Education policies how the discussion in the classroom is actually okay and appropriate under their own policies and under the Hawaii Board of Education.
Yes, exactly. They use language here. I'll read it. Both the policy and regulation allow for classroom discussions of matters which generate opposing viewpoints and are not intended to suppress spontaneous student discussion during approved lesson plans. And that's, of course, exactly the kind of thing we were arguing in our letter, that a teacher, or students for that matter, shouldn't be punished for saying something controversial. Our letter was sent on behalf of this teacher, but one of the things we talked about in the letter is the rights of the students involved, right? That a student who simply acknowledged something we all know, that Charlie Kirk was murdered for what he said, that students are now having their speech threatened too, right? And so this language, it's brief, but this language in their letter is a really powerful acknowledgement of the rights of both students and teachers to talk about important things like the murder of Charlie Kirk. And you mentioned that we took it right to the top. We were really pleased to see this letter came to us signed by the superintendent of education for the state of Hawaii. So essentially the head education official for the state of Hawaii responded to our letter and sent us this response. We think that really represents them taking this seriously. And of course, Hawaii is a very blue state, right? And so we're really encouraged to see that our letter got this attention and our letter got the response that it did. It really represents vindication for our client and vindication for her students.
Nathan, thank you so much for joining us on this. We're going to talk about this other issue. We're going to just tease it out because we'll get to it probably either later in the show or tomorrow. But that's a big victory. But these victories, you always know there's another case right behind it. And we actually have a case out of New York where a student wanted to have a Jesus club. Once again, it seems like this is popping up all over. And they told the student, that even though there's plenty of secular groups, that the Jesus Club was not inclusive enough and that people of other faiths could be offended. And so what are we doing? We sent a demand letter today because we have the law on our side, and the ACLJ actually won the Supreme Court cases that allow for that. So we're going to get more into that later, but we're on to the next case already.